بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. So the next masala we are discussing, or the next part of the next terminologies in Mustalahul Hadith that we're discussing is called the Fard. And the Fard can either be Fard Mutlaq or Fard Nisbi. And we'll discuss each one of these by the time that lesson we understand what's going on, inshallah, hopefully, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So let's have a quick recap first. Let's do, because there's lots of information. Let's do a recap beginning of each lesson. So we have, I hope you can see that on the screen. We have first of all, we have a hadith. Hadith is made up of what? A sanad and a matn. And according to the siha, whether this hadith is sahih or not, what can we have? We can have hadithun sahihun, hasan, and da'if. What's the definition of hadithun sahihun? Sanad is muttasil, then adl. Each rawi must have dhabt and adala. That's the thing regarding the sanad. And there must be no shuzuz or no illa. And a hadithun hasan is what? When any of the rawi, their dhabt is da'if. Not da'if, khafif, sorry. Khafif. And if the dhabt is lower than that, or any of the other four things have an illa, any of the other four things are an issue, the ittisalu sanad, the adala, the shuzuz, or the mukhalafa, then it becomes hadithun da'ifun, generally. Okay? Relative to who the last person in the chain is, what's a hadith called? It can either be what? Marfu', mawquf, and maqtu'. What's a hadith marfu'? When the chain ends with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it is known as a hadith marfu'. When the chain ends at tabi'i, it is known as a hadith mawquf, correct. And when it ends at tabi'i, it is known as hadith maqtu'. Okay? And if a hadith is muttasilu sanad and it is marfu', what's it called? Is marfu' and muttasil is called musnad. If the hadith has numerous narrators, on that aspect, how many types of hadith do we have? 3. What are the 3? What can it be, the 3? It's going to be either, if there's a mutawatir. Mutawatir means what? That so many people narrate it that it's like impossible for it to be a lie. It's improbable for it to be a lie. There's too many people narrating it. And then after, if you have how many? What's mashhur? What's a hadith mashhur? What's a hadith mashhur? 3 or more in each level, each layer, each tabaqa, in each era. It's called hadithun mashhur. After that comes hadithun what? Aziz. And hadithun aziz is what? Yeah, so the minimum number of narrators in each era is 2, nothing less than that. And anything less than that, if there's a single narrator in each place, is called what? It's called gharib. Good. Then the next aspect is whether the hadith, the sanad is what? Muttasil or it's munqati. Is the chain joined together or is there a breakage? Regarding to that, what do we have? What's the first type? We have muttasil. Muttasil means what? Each person has heard the hadith from the person above him. Yes? What's the hadithul mursal? The sahabi has been removed or dropped. After mursal, we have a mu'allaq. What's a mu'allaq? When there are missing links from the beginning of the chain. It's called hadithun mu'allaq. And then what's hadithun mu'adhan? When there are 2 people missing in the chain, one after the other. And everything else, and then you have mudallas. What's a mudallas? Tadlis means to mislead somebody, but mudallas or tadlisu shuyukh, tadlisu mudallas, then what's it called? How do you explain mudallas? A person narrates a hadith in such a way that so he narrates a hadith from a person who he has met or who he has heard from. Yes? He's heard from him or he's met him. And he narrates a hadith from him. What does that give the impression? And he narrates a hadith from him using the word what? An. Mu'annan or mu'annan. Okay? So you either have a mu'annan or mu'annan from a person who you have met or who you have heard from, but you haven't heard that hadith. That's called what? Mudallas. Correct? And then the other types of tadlis is what? Which is not part of ittisal or inqita is what? When you narrate the teacher's name with what? In a way what people is not familiar. You say a kunya or a title or a name that people are not familiar with. This is called also tadlis. Tadlis al-shuyukh. Good? And what are the ways of expressing the hadith? The siyaghul ada, the way you can express the hadith. You can narrate the hadith. What are they? It can be sarih fi sama', meaning explicit, that you've heard them. You say sami'na, haddathana, akhbarana, sami'tuhu yaqul. Yes, ra'aytuhu. That's called as-sarih fi sama'. The sama' is clear. Or it can be muhtamil, meaning what? It is possible you have heard it. And it's either going to be an-ana or an-ana. Correct? Using the word an or using the word anna. And then we started going through some uyub of the hadith, some mistakes that may occur within the narration. Not the hadith, not the Prophet's words, but the way it has been transmitted to us. What is a hadith in mubham? So one is that you say, حدثني رجل أو امرأة أو رجل من بني فلان. You just, أو شيخ. You don't say the person's name. Why is this hadith da'if? Why is this aib? Because we don't know who he is. Is he adala adab? We can't tell you. Okay. Then, what does shadh mean? Hadithun shadh. Yes, there's a hadith which in itself is narrated by adil and dhabit, somebody who has tamud dhab and somebody who is adala. However, there is somebody who is more adbat, who has more dhabt, who is more thiqah than him, or more people who are thiqah than him, and they narrate it what? Differently. This is called then the one that is the one that we assume is mistaken is called shadh, and the contradictory one or the opposite one, the opposite one or the other one, which is the more preserved one, is called what? Mahfuz. Correct? And then we said we can have qalb in isad and qalb in matan, not isad, isnad. We can have qalb in isnad and qalb in matan. What's qalb in isnad? Where you change. There's a few types of qalb al-isnad, but for now we just done one. When you say Ka'b ibn Murrah, Murrah ibn Ka'b, Hashim Muhammad, Muhammad Hashim, you just change the names around. And qalb in matan is when you do what? You change the word around. For example, he spends with his left hand, with his right hand doesn't know. It's supposed to be what? لا تعلم شماله ما تنفق يمينه. So you mix up the word. That's called what? Qalb. And this qalb can occur in the sanad or it can occur in the matan. Are you already following the terms that you have so far? So these terms, G, that has come before. G. Okay, Bismillah. The next thing we're discussing here is fard. So fard is basically like a hadith, is gharib basically. The word fard and the word gharib, I mean, okay, there's so many different opinions and different ulama have different things, but the general is what? Is a fard is when you have one narrator, like a gharib. Fard and gharib mean the same thing more or less. Okay? So the hadith of إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Does anybody know who narrates this hadith? The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Does anybody know? Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. Now, from the Sahaba, there is nobody else narrating this hadith. From the Sahaba, nobody else narrates this hadith. So obviously from here onwards, the hadith becomes what? It's gharib, isn't it? Because if a Sahaba's level is only one narrator, then it's gharib. It can't become anything more than gharib. It can't become aziz. It can't become, once in this generation there's one, that's it, it's dropped to gharib and that's it, done. Correct? So in this aspect, is fard. So gharib and fard is the same thing here. But we will also say the word fard is also a bit more detailed. We say far, infarada bihi, or you say tafarrada bihi. We use the word, for example, here. Tafarrada. Tafarrada. Even from Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, this tafarrud is a fard. This is a fard. Because who narrates Umar ibn al-Khattab? Only whom? Al-Qama. Al-Qama ibn Waqqas al-Laythi rahimahullah. He's the only person, only tabi who narrates from Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. So it's the fard. So it's a gharib as well, because once the gharab is established, it's gharib. But we say that it is tafarrud. That only Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu has narrated hadith. Only Umar ibn al-Khattab has narrated from the Prophet, so it becomes gharib straight away. And even from Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu is a fard still. Because why? It's one off. Only Al-Qama ibn Waqqas al-Laythi narrated this. Correct? From Al-Qama ibn Waqqas, you only have Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Taymi. So relatives, so again, even here is what? A fard from Al-Qama. Tafarrada bihi, Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Taymi and Al-Qama. Only he has narrated from Al-Qama, nobody else. And then you go to Yahya ibn Sa'id. That's really typos, it is not Yahya ibn Sa'id. Yahya ibn Sa'id, so that is missing. So Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, rahimahullah. Only he narrates from Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Taymi. So these are what? Fard. Tafarrad. Al-Qama and Tafarrud from Umar al-Khattab. Nobody else narrates from Umar al-Khattab. Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Taymi, he did Tafarrud from whom? He did Tafarrud from whom? Al-Qama. And Yahya ibn Sa'id, he did Tafarrud from Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Taymi. Nobody else narrated it. After Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, radiyallahu ta'ala an, rahimahullah, you have then different narrators. You have Sufyan ibn Uyayna. So from Sufyan ibn Umayyah you have Humaydi, and from Humaydi you have Bukhari rahimahullah. And then from there you have Muhammad ibn Kathir, from Muhammad ibn Kathir you have Abu Dawud. Correct? Then you have Layth ibn Sa'ad. He also narrates this hadith from Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari. And from him you have Muhammad ibn Rumh. And then from Yahya ibn Sa'id you have, again now, is it gharaba? Is it fard from Yahya ibn Sa'id? No. From Yahya ibn Sa'id there are many narrators. But until Muhammad ibn Ibrahim, each narrator had done tafarrud. Like he was the only one to narrate from his teacher. He was the only one to narrate from his teacher. It's called a fard. Yes? Correct? So now you have here another narrator, he narrates from him, and from Ibn Majah narrates from both of them. Understood? You follow me? Now, this tafarrud, we say is fard, meaning, yes, it's fard, okay? We got what a fard is? So fard and gharib are similar, because you can have a gharib. So gharib is only used for overall. Is there a one narrator at any point in the chain? And fard is not necessarily, you still discuss, like we don't have to discuss the fard or it being gharib at Ibrahim al-Taymi, because it's already been established on Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu being a gharib hadith. But we talk about fard still, because like, okay, who else narrated from Al-Qama? Who else narrated from Ibrahim al-Taymi? Who else narrated from Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari? Do you understand? Are you following me? Do you understand? So this is called what? A fard. Okay? Okay. That's one type of fard. Another type of fard, we have the hadith. We have this hadith here. That Umar al-Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala, and he asked Abu Waqid al-Laythi, ماذا يقرأ به رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في الأضحى والفطر? What did Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم used to read in Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr? So he said he read بسورة قاف, he read Al-Quran al-Majid, قاف al-Quran al-Majid, and he read واقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. That's one hadith. Now, if you look at it here, you have Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now, obviously, Umar al-Khattab is asking the question, but the narrator is who? Abu Waqid al-Laythi. And the person who heard this hadith, who heard this incident, where Umar radiallahu asked a question, was Ubaydullah ibn Abdullah ibn Utbah. And he narrated from Dhamra ibn Sa'id al-Mazini. Okay? Now, I couldn't find the other narrators, but what they've said, that there's other narrators from him. Correct? But you say that Malik is called a tafarrud of a thiqah. Meaning the other narrators, we're not talking about tafarrud being like general. We're talking about a specific type of singling out. A specific type of tafarrud. Meaning that from Zamara ibn Sa'id al-Mazini, Malik is the only tam muzzabt narrator. In the previous one is absolute. For example, here in this hadith, I assume, I'm not sure, but I'm assuming that this is tafarrud, this is fard mutlaq. This is fard mutlaq. Why? Because Abu Waqid al-Laythi is the only person that narrates hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. Correct? So in all aspects, it's fard. Ubaydullah ibn Abdullah ibn Utbah, he is the only person to narrate from Abu Waqid al-Laythi. That's fard mutlaq, like in all aspects. And this, I'm assuming as well, I don't have all the narration in front of me, but from what we have in front of us, this is also a fard mutlaq. This is not a fard mutlaq. I mean, it's not a fard in all aspects, because the other narrators, I don't have the chains I cannot find in the books of hadith when I search for them. But what we have here, we have other narrators narrating. But when we say the fard, how is the fard? In which aspect is the fard? The tafarrud of narrators or tafarrud of a thiqah? Tafarrud of a thiqah. So it's a relative. What does relative mean in Arabic? Nisbatun. Bin nisbati, relative to. So relative to the thiqah rawi, Malik has done tafarrud. Malik is the only thiqah rawi to narrate from Dhamara ibn Sa'id al-Mazini. You understand? So a fard can be absolute, meaning just talking about fard in all aspects. Yes? Is there, for example, if you to say, let's say I've got one person in class, like online, on site, that's fard mutlaq or fard nisbi? Fard mutlaq. And I say we've got one person on site and one person online in America, one person online in Saudi Arabia, and one person online in, I don't know, whichever, where are you from? Dubai, Abu Dhabi. Where is it? Dubai, for example. So now, it's fard nisbi, that he's the only narrator from Dubai. He's the only narrator from, or the only student from America, the only student from Riyadh, the only student from Saudi Arabia, whatever. You understand? So fard mutlaq is only, that's it, nobody else. And fard nisba means that there's other narrators, but relative to one aspect is a fard. You can have fard, maybe the only thiqah narrator, or the only people from Medina to narrate it, or the only people from Fulan to narrate it. Yes? Do you understand the difference between fard, what we mean by fard, and then fard nisbi and fard mutlaq? Are you following, Hamad? Ahmad? Yes? Nuh? You following? Yes? Okay. Yes, Ahmad, you following? You good? So we have fard. Fard means what? Fard means what? That there's one narrator. What does it mean? One narrator. And that one narrator can be fard mutlaq, like just like in all aspects. Like Umar ibn Khattab, tafarrada bihi an Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then from him, Al-Qalam ibn Waqqas al-Laythi, tafarrada bihi. Yes? Sorry. Here, Al-Qalam ibn Waqqas al-Laythi, tafarrada bihi. Then you have Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Taymi, tafarrada bihi. Then Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari. These are all fard mutlaq, meaning they're the only people to narrate this hadith. Yes? And let's say, this is not the case, because the other narrators, when it gets here, the chain gets so much. But let's say, for example, just assuming, that's not even right, but assumption, we could say, imagine what we had on the screen was all the narrators. Just imagine for 1 minute that what we have on the screen is all narrators of Ilm al-A'mal bin Niyyat. We would say that Abu Dawud, I've got so many mistakes, Abu Dawud. The Abu Dawud is what? He's tafarrada an Muhammad ibn Kathir. Do you understand? He's the only person that narrates Muhammad ibn Kathir. If this was the only information available, there are other narrators. I'm just saying, for example, argument's sake, this is all the information here. There's no other narrations. Just for 1 minute, assume that. Then Abu Dawud is the tafarrud of Muhammad ibn Kathir. And let's say, for example, Sufyan ibn Uyayna is from Makkah. He used to live in Makkah. I don't know where these two guys are from. But let's assume we say here, Sufyan ibn Uyayna is the only Makki to narrate. Is the only what? Makki to narrate it. So tafarrada bihi min ahli Makkah. He's relative to the ahli Makkah. He's the only ahli Makkah to narrate. That's fard nisbi. From the aspect of the ahli Makkah, he's the only Meccan to narrate it. That's what nisbi now. Relative to a particular aspect. Okay? So you have fard mutlaq, meaning he's the only narrator at all, in all aspects. Like there's no other narrator. And muqayyad, or it's also called nisbi, is he's the only narrator from Makkah, only thiqa narrator, only narrator from this city, only narrator wherever, from a particular aspect. That's called fard nisbi. And you can either have only thiqa narrator, only person from that city. He's the only person to narrate from him. Like for example, if you assume in that top narration that Abu Dawud is the only narrator narrate from the other person before him. So you can have different i'tibar, different aspects of the fard. Does that make any sense? You guys following me? Yes? So what we have here, وَالْفَرْدُ مَا قَيَّدْتَهُ بِثِقَةٍ. He's only got fard muqayyad in his book. He's not mentioned fard mutlaq in his book. So fard mutlaq is not mentioned in the matan. This is now line number 23. He's not mentioned fard mutlaq. He's only got fard what? Nisbi. And he's called fard nisbi what? Fard muqayyad. But most people mention it in their books as fard nisbi. But he's mentioned as fard muqayyad. So if fard muqayyad is ma qayyadtahu bi thiqatin. So if fard muqayyad, if fard al-muqayyad is that ma qayyadtahu bi thiqatin, is which you confine or attribute to a thiqa, meaning a fard muqayyad can be the only thiqa narrator to narrate this is fulan, or qasrin, or you narrate it to a particular group or area, or jam'in ala riwayatin, or the only person narrate from so and so narrator. Yes? You can have, for example, a hadith, like, for example, you can say the only person narrate from Sufyan ibn Uyayna is fulan. So the only narrator from him. So you can have different i'tibar. So if you have a fard mutlaq is what? Is only one narrator in total. And fard nisbi is when you have a specific aspect, whether it's to do with what? The only thiqa narrator, or the only person from a particular group, or the only person from a particular city, or the only particular person from his students. Yes? That's called fard nisbi. Understood? I'm not going to go over the revision again. We've done it at the beginning of the lesson, but it's good to keep going over them again. So we have mawquf. We've done all of this revision at the beginning of the lesson. Okay, and we'll stop here today, inshallah. Pardon me, can you repeat the question? Ji. Well, fard nisbi is an extension, kind of. It's a particular type. See what happened. What's the point of that? Let's say, for example, let's say we have, how many of you in the class? 11, 12 of you in the class, right? And we say, Ibrahim is the farad bihi Ibrahim and Hashim. It's like, this is weird. He has so many students, and only why does only Ibrahim narrate this hadith? Like, did nobody else hear it? It feels a question mark in it. Like, okay, you have 10 students in the class, and he's the only one who heard that tomorrow's holiday. He's the only one who heard that tomorrow there's no lesson. That's the question, isn't it? So to have a fard nisbi, so maybe like in that aspect, maybe you say, well, the only student, so maybe he's a thiqa narrator, but you say, well, look, this is the narrator, he's got many students, but this is fard nisbi here. So he's the only student from the narrator, so why? Yes? So from his students, he's the only person narrate, or he's the only person narrate this word. Yes? So nisbatan, relative to one aspect. Yes? Okay. Okay. Everybody understand? Okay, let's stop here today. Subhanallah wa bihamdi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu